Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This is Dr. Stephen Walker, licensed psychologist. I apologize for my departure from my live streams. We've had some significant events happen in our family that we were recovering from, and thankfully everything has gotten back on track, coupled with the, pressures and stresses of being a full-time on the front lines mental health provider. That can be quite taxing sometimes. Sometimes things just don't come together for me to be on live, so I do apologize for that. We're going to try to be at least back on at least once a week for the time being, and see if we can manage to do twice a week. But I do apologize. I appreciate all the messages I received wondering where I was and how things were going. But just to let everybody know, we're back. Okay, so want to do some quick housekeeping. I want to remind everybody of our sponsor, betterhelp.com. You can use this promo code to get some help. It's an online provider of mental health. They have thousands of licensed practitioners that you can use to work on your issues. Because again, remember, there's absolutely nothing wrong with working on your issues. And if you want to work on them with somebody licensed who can help you with them, then you should check out betterhelp.com. Again, I want to also remind everybody about my Help a Human Fund. This is a fund I started to help people who can't afford to pay for their mental health services. You can donate into this fund, and it goes directly, 100% of your donation goes to them. Okay, everything that we use, anything that gets donated gets directly used for their treatment. So wanted to talk about tonight's topic. If anybody has any questions, feel free. Hey Penny, how are you? Hey Josie, good to see you. Appreciate you logging on live. I wanted to thank Bracy about giving me this topic. She suggested doing a live stream on grief, and obviously with COVID, this is a good time to be talking about grief. But before I do that, I want to talk briefly about something that's been going on in the media recently with a young tennis player who has been struggling with her own mental health issues and has been taking quite a lot of flack for that. And I wanted to just talk briefly about that. Here's the story. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see it, but it's a story about a young tennis player who decided not to do interviews, and she's been vilified in some circles, but in other mental health circles like what I'm in, we've been applauding that, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with what she's going through. If she said, hey, I can't do these interviews because I have asthma and I need my body to recover, or if I have some other physical ailment that is causing her to not be able to do the interviews, then I would imagine everybody would be okay with that. But because she mentioned that she's struggling with some depression and some other things, she's being held to a different standard, which is just ridiculous, honestly, because the idea that anybody should be ashamed of being depressed or having any kind of mental issue or emotional issue or whatever issue is just ludicrous. That we are still living in a culture where people are ashamed to talk about what's on their mind. And it's why we have the society that we have, because people are ashamed to discuss how they're feeling. Hey, Penny, thanks for welcoming me back. Yeah, it's been a little 3-week break. I'm going to try to get on more. But like I was saying before, Naomi has nothing to be ashamed of. People forget how young she is. She's not used to dealing with this. Maybe she's got some social anxiety. I don't even know why. I was having this discussion with a friend of mine. I don't know any other sport where athletes are forced to talk to the media. I don't know where that happens. They're encouraged. They don't have to. They can always decline to speak to the media. I don't know why tennis is different. But the key is the double standard, is the idea that because it's a mental or emotional issue she has, that somehow there's something wrong with that, so she shouldn't get excused. She should get excused. She should get excused if she said, well, I can't come on because I have to ice my knee. Okay. So anyway, that's what I would encourage you guys to think about when it comes to your own mental illness or your own mental health, is that there's nothing wrong with having issues related to mental health and mental issues. Now, remember, these live streams, the reason I'm trying to fit them in and do them, get back to doing them, is for you to ask questions, to talk about what's on your mind, to engage with you. That's why I do them live. That's why they're not edited. That's why it's called a live stream, because it's a stream so that people can engage with me and talk about what is on their mind, talk about what's happening with them. The issue that I see in my field is that a lot of people do not talk about, they don't talk about what's on their mind enough, and they suffer in silence, and they suffer with feelings of inferiority, or like tonight's topic is grief. A lot of people struggle with things related to grief that they quite frankly don't need to be struggling with, because a lot of these issues can be healed. A lot of these issues can be worked on. So what I would encourage you guys to think about related to what you're thinking and feeling is that talk about it. So let's take tonight's topic, grief. Okay. This is a very deep, broad topic. So it's not going to be fully addressed in half an hour, 45 minutes. What this is a way for people, if you're struggling with grief, if there's something on your mind, if you feel that something still hasn't healed, talk about it. Ask me a question about how to manage it. Again, remember, hey, Josie, how are you from Jersey? How's it going? So grief is a feeling of loss. Obviously, when you're grieving someone, they're gone from your life. Now let's talk about issues that exacerbate grief. The main one that I've seen that exacerbates grief is guilt. People feel guilty about what kind of relationship they had with somebody. People feel guilty about whether or not they were a good person. People feel guilty about various amounts of things that cause them to experience negative emotions in the present moment. One of the things I've found with people who experience large amounts of grief after somebody has passed away is regret. Okay. Guilt and regret go hand in hand. So let's say you lost, I don't know, your mother, your father, losing a child. That's some serious stuff. One of the things we've been dealing with is, I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago, I was talking about my son had an accident in the playground where he face planted pretty badly and knocked out his teeth, and we had to rush him down to the emergency room and go to one hospital, go to another. And then one of the reasons I wasn't on was because there were some complications with that. So we experienced what it felt like to have a child who has been injured. And I can just imagine, I can't, but I can just imagine what it must feel like for a parent or somebody who has lost a child, the amount of grief and sadness that they must feel. So I was working with somebody today about this issue, and one of the things that came up for this person, or while we were talking about what they were feeling, was the anticipation they experienced prior to their mother's passing away. So what came out in our session, and by the way, I'm a psychologist and close to 25 years doing this. I'm going to always default to the idea that you need to talk these things out. If you're feeling grief, if you're having sustained negative emotion over the loss of someone in your life, and you're holding that in, or you're reading or listening to podcasts, and that's all good stuff, don't get me wrong. But if that's all you're doing, you're only getting to some of the issue. The issue has to be talked out with somebody who knows how to handle that, hold that, feed it back to you, work you through those emotions so that you can find some relief. But as I was talking to this individual, we were talking about what she was feeling prior to her mother's passing away. And what came out was that she was dreading it. She had spent years dreading the death of her mother. So that is a compounding variable to the experience of grief, because you spend years and years, oh man, when my mom passes away, I'm not going to be able to deal with that, or that's going to definitely throw me for a loop, or whatever it is. We need to be mindful of what we're telling ourselves about losing somebody. Now, again, remember, everybody, I appreciate you listening to me. I appreciate you logging on to hear my sage words of wisdom, but that's not why I'm doing this. Please ask a question or make a comment, okay? You can take me in whatever direction you want. If you're struggling with addiction, if you're struggling with sexuality issues, if you're, depressed, if you're anxious, if you have something on your mind, whatever it may be, these live streams are for you to engage with me about either the topic we're talking about or anything on your mind, okay? So that's one of the variables to be conscious of. If you have somebody in your life that's sick, or if you have a fear of loss, you're going to have to start dealing with that prior to the person passing away. Okay, now that's one and again, I'm just going to touch on things I've seen throughout my years of working with people that I've seen make people kind of feel worse than they need to feel. The second thing that makes people feel worse, like I mentioned before, is guilt and regret, meaning that they have many regret. Oh, I wish I had. Why didn't I? Oh, I wish I. And they beat themselves up for years and years, wishing that they had done something better. They had been a better daughter, a better husband, a better son, whatever it may be. So my advice to people prior to experiencing the loss: do what you can for you to be able to deal with somebody's loss. If it means being able to remember, oh, I remember I moved to Texas to be closer to my parent who, whatever. If you can't do that, visit them. If you could do what you need to do to remind yourself of how you tried to be a good son, daughter, whatever it may be. If you have issues with somebody and you're worried, oh God, how am I going to handle when they pass away? Try to talk things out with them. Try to engage with them while they're still alive. Okay? Try to do what you need to do in order to heal from the loss, meaning that try to say to yourself, well, if mom, dad, uncle, grandpa, wife, husband, if they were to pass away tomorrow, what would be left for me? What would be a source of regret or guilt? Deal with that now, okay? Deal with that in the present moment so that you can work on how the loss affects you, because I hear this a lot. People say this to me all the time. Oh man, if that happens, I can't deal with that. That's going to screw me up. And this is the anticipatory negativity that they put out into the future on an event that hasn't even happened yet. Okay. So Marie is asking, I'm still grieving my mom, 2008, and worse, my dad, 2015. I feel stuck in depression, and I feel like a big part of my life was taken with them. Okay, Marie, thank you for sharing that. So what I would ask you, Marie, is, have you worked on any of that? Because again, going into the present moment, now taking Marie's question, you've lost somebody. Marie needs to try to get herself into a situation where, sorry, I just had a client text me. Marie needs to get herself into a situation where, replying to Marie, I'm 66. I've got some good years left. Yes, you do, Marie. And one of the things I would work with you on, if I was working with you, is talking about what's going on with your mom. Like, why are you still grieving the loss of them? Now, your father and your mother passing away, that's a 1-2 punch. Absolutely. 7 years apart. When you say you're stuck in depression and you feel like a big part of your life was taken with them, we need to talk that out. You need to talk that out in a structured and a therapeutic environment so you can talk about the depression. One of the things I would say to you point blank is you're not stuck in depression, Marie. You're still saddened by the loss of them. It's okay that you're saddened by the loss of them, but we need to figure out why they were such a big part of your life in the present moment, meaning like, why do you feel that your life has been taken away from you with them? Now, there are many reasons for that. Maybe you guys were very close. Maybe you lived together. Maybe they relied on you. I don't know. But one thing I'm hearing from your comment is that you guys were obviously very close. You guys spent a lot of time together. So what I would recommend for you is, if you haven't done it already, Marie, and thank you for sharing your story. And you're right. I mean, people are living into their 90s now. You absolutely have many lives, many years to go. What I would recommend for you is we need to work on what is going on with your depression. Why are you so depressed about this? Now, people would say, well, they lost their mother and father. Absolutely. That's depression. You're going to feel sad. But a lot of the depression, Marie, or anybody's feeling when they lose a parent is what's feeding the depression. People don't understand that a lot of times we're not even aware. People think that like negative thoughts and emotions just exist within us, like our eyes. They don't. A lot of times negative emotions are being fed by faulty beliefs or guilt or some other negative emotion, or those negative emotions are creating feelings which then are causing you to experience them in a way that you don't know how to handle. Yes, I gave up a 20-year job on the coast to move back home to care for them. I feel alone. Well, there you go. There you go. And like I said, Marie and I haven't met, and she's just feeding me this lie. But yes, I sense that there was something going on prior to their death that caused you to have to become emotionally dependent on them, which, at this stage, what I would have said to you, 20 years ago was, Marie needs to also work on having a life of her own. Marie needs to work on having friends and people that she can rely on, whether it's a husband or girlfriend or whatever it may be. But obviously you all were very close. So when you say you gave up a 20-year job on the coast to move back to home to care for them, I would ask you, well, let's talk about that. Why did you do that? Why did you feel you needed to give up your job? And the answer could be as easy as, well, I love them. But see, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to modulate and manage emotion, whether that's love, hate, whatever, negative, positive. I don't know what happened, what was going on with Marie when she was growing. Hey, Laura, how are you? I'll get to your question in a second. Thank you, Laura. One of the things that people don't understand is emotions don't have to just exist like wildflowers in a field. They can be managed, they can be groomed. So one of the things I would have worked with you on, Marie, is what's going on with the level of enmeshment in the family that caused you to feel that you had to give up your job and move back home to care for them. I don't know if there were issues from the past that were unresolved that you felt a sort of, a need to do it. Maybe you're just a good, loving daughter. But dealing with you in the present, Marie, I would definitely encourage you to work with somebody on these feelings, on this grief, on feeling stuck in your depression. Okay, because a lot of times what feeds depression is feelings of isolation, feelings of literally putting all your emotional eggs into one basket. And I would imagine, Marie, that you spent many days worrying about, oh my God, what am I going to do when they pass away? So again, Marie, we need to get ourselves into a situation where we can talk some of this out, because grief can be managed. I had somebody the other day tell me, well, I don't know if I'm mourning the right way. I don't even know what mourning means, mourning the loss. What is that word, mourning? So, that's something that people need to look at. Look up the definition of mourning if you're mourning a loss, and you'll find you're absolutely mourning the loss, because the definition of mourning is experiencing negative affect about the death of somebody close to you or the loss of something significant in your life, a job, a car. It can be anything. People mourn. But the idea that you're not mourning correctly means that there's something within you that is causing you to feel that you're not doing enough. Let's see here. Brothers were across the state and is why I came. Thank you. I will get back into therapy right away. Okay, great. That's great to hear. And we don't have to call it therapy. We can call it, I just need to talk to someone about how I'm feeling. We don't have to label it. You can just look at it like a dentist. You're going into, people don't say I'm going into dental therapy. They say I'm going to the dentist like it's nothing. So yeah, Marie, definitely work on it. But Marie, what I would say to you in closing here, and then I'll get to Laura's questions. Thank you. And again, remember everybody, this live stream is about asking questions. Okay. Remember that. Hey Kat, how are you? Hey Amity, how you doing? Great. You guys have been in grief sessions. I'll get to that in a second. But these live streams are about interacting with a licensed mental health provider so that you guys can talk about it and work through and get some ideas. So yeah, Marie, definitely get yourself into a situation where you can talk it out. But Marie, you got to talk to yourself. Marie has to say to herself tonight, I was a good daughter. I was a good daughter. I tried to help them before they passed away. And start focusing on all the ways you were a good daughter, Marie. Try to even channel, your mom's or dad's voice. And I'm sure they're saying, thanks, honey. Thanks for taking care of us before we passed away. That was great. You gave up your 20-year job to come back, and because your brothers wouldn't do it. Thank you. Try to hear some of that, because I don't know, again, I could be wrong. So tell me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be some hard on Marie-ness going on, that Marie is hard on Marie. Never enough. I never did enough. You did enough, sister. And you need to say that to yourself a little bit. Okay. You need to comfort and soothe Marie a little bit, because Marie is definitely needing some of that now. Definitely. Okay. So let's get to Laura's questions. And again, everybody, if you're watching live, don't just sit in the background there. Ask a question. Okay. Laura's saying, well, I'm 47. I'm not grieving, but everyone else seems to be, and they want to find answers in me, but I'm not that person. I don't want to depend on a boyfriend or girlfriend. I want to learn how to depend on myself. I want to be independent. Okay, great. Well, thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. I don't quite know what you mean by people are grieving around you and everyone wants you to be their savior or their sounding board and look for answers in you. There are many ways you can help people, and finding answers for them is one of them. Another way is just empathizing with them, just feeling them. So, but your second part of your question is, I don't want to depend on a boyfriend or girlfriend. I want to learn how to depend on myself. I want to be independent. Okay, well, again, Laura, I would encourage you to work on that. Why? What is being relied upon stir up in you? This whole idea of independence. I've coined the term pathological individualism for this, for what we learn culturally in our country here, where, this is a country about individualism, meaning I don't need nobody. I want to do it on my own. I don't want to depend on anybody. I don't want anyone to depend on me. It's a very American Western way of looking at things. Most other cultures are collectivistic. They see themselves as part of a whole. They see themselves as part of a larger unity of people. We don't. We tend to see ourselves in terms of what's right for me. So Laura, what I would ask you to think about is, when somebody is relying on you, what does that stir up in you? Why do you need to be independent on your own? And, being that I know some of Laura's history, we know where that goes back to, Laura. We know some of the things that you've been through, some of the things that we've discussed. But what I'm hearing is almost like a sort of a feeling that, I don't want the pressure of having anyone depend on me, because when I depended on somebody in the past, they let me down. So, we need to work through what we learned from other people relating to being able to count on people, being able to be dependent on people. because the reality of mental health, people, is too much independence. That's why I call it pathological individualism. Becomes pathological, people. Narcissism is the hot topic, and everyone's a narcissistic or narcissist expert these days. But the key to narcissism is lack of empathy, lack of caring, lack of being affected by other people. Not a good thing. And I know, like I've talked about in some of my previous live streams, there are books out there about how to not care, and people with way more followers than me telling people, oh, only think of yourself and only care. Again, from a classic mental health perspective, that is the worst advice you can give somebody, to learn to only rely on yourself. Because the problem with that is when you become only dependent on you, then the problem is you have no sounding board, you have no reference point, because all you care about is what you're thinking and feeling. And then you're wondering why other people aren't thinking and feeling. And I guarantee you, the people who are out there talking about, don't rely on anybody, have been extremely let down in their life. And they're literally bleeding all over people, because that's what they've come to terms with. And that's how they've come to terms with their loss. So they're telling other people this will work for you. BS. It's not going to work for you. In fact, it's going to make you feel more isolated. Laura's saying, because a lot of people don't rely on themselves, and I'm stuck on taking care of them. And there is a serious amount of people do not want that. Yes, you're right about that. Okay. Well, Laura, I hear you. And if you're being put in a position where you don't want people to rely on you, then, that's something that you have to work on. I mean, meaning that you have to set better boundaries. You have to tell people, look, it's too much. It's too much that, that people are relying on me. Now, again, I don't know who this is. We haven't spoken in a while, but from what I remember, Laura, there was a time in your life when you needed to rely on people too. And they were there for you, and they helped you through some, as we've talked about, some pretty significant events in your life that you now are on the other side of. So, and I don't want to divulge too much here live, but I did today. Okay, good. But we can't forget that part of being healthy is relying on other people. I mean, one of the reasons cancer cells grow, people, is because cells start being too independent and attacking other cells, and the whole idea of cancer is independent cells who are going on their merry way. And I'm obviously trivializing it, but you know what I mean? The idea that we don't need other people is not a healthy way of being on an extreme level. If Homo sapiens, if Neanderthal man was just strictly independent and didn't organize and get collective, we wouldn't have evolved. In fact, the on an evolutionary basis, it's hardwired into us to cooperate. They've done studies to show where people actually will default to cooperation. So we're a little off topic, and that's fine, because that's what these live streams are about. But what I would encourage Laura to do is to kind of get into her thinking a little bit and say, well, what is going on? Why am I angry about having somebody be dependent on me? What is going on with me where I'm feeling like there's something wrong with somebody being dependent on me? Is it causing me to feel kind of like too much pressure on me, or are there unresolved feelings of anger towards that person where they've hurt you a lot, and they're like, now they want to depend on you. Now they want, for you to feel like you want to take care of them, when your whole life they've either caused you a lot of pain, or, these are issues that need to be worked out in an environment where you can talk things out. Just reading about it is not going to get to those deeper levels of those deeper layers of emotional trauma and pain that we all have, that there's nothing wrong with. But again, because we live and it's not only us, but there's a great book out there if you ever want to read it. It's called Culture and Mental Illness. It's about how culture and mental illness, I think the author is Kozeline. No, wait a minute. Do I have that book? Anyway, just type in culture and mental illness. But anyway, it's all about how mental illness expresses itself differently in different cultures. And you'll find that in Western culture, it's it's stigmatized a lot. Yeah, I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere in there. But it just shows you that in other cultures, people deal with mental illness in a different way. In some cultures, who what you would consider a crazy person with visions and speaking in tongues and all, is the shaman is the healer. So anyway, getting back on topic here, Laura, I hope that we've talked about doing some work again, and I'll try to work that out. We've had the mental health industry in this country is just ridiculous, but that's a whole nother conversation with insurance companies. That's why I've started this fund called Help a Human, because it's all about trying to get a fund going that I can draw from to help people. And I would love, nothing would make me happier than to give my services away. But, unless someone's going to pay my business taxes, I don't want to tell you what my tax rates are for running a small business. I don't, my mortgage, all the things that an economic-based society relies on. I wish I could give my services away. So if you know somebody that has won the lottery, direct them to helpahuman.org. All the money goes towards helping people who can't afford it or whose insurance policies, unfortunately, I don't take, or we're not in network for, or whatever it may be. Okay. Mental illness is stigma. Yes, they like to make you feel bad about it. I think there should be a better word for it. Yeah. How about, I have a pain like in my soul that needs to be worked on. How about it's okay that I have issues from my past because I didn't ask for them. Kat, let me see here. Hold on one sec. Amity is saying, so people who don't know, Kat is a viewer of the show. She's got dissociative identity disorder because of some trauma she went through. One of her alters is out tonight. She's saying Kat is still having serious issues with self-punishment, so she's still in lockdown. Okay, well, I hear you, Amity, and I know lockdown is sort of what you're saying, but we don't need to lock down. And Kat needs to get back on track with working through why she's self-punishing. The losing her mom didn't help, the issue with her brother. I mean, these are all things that aren't helping Kat heal. But Kat, if you can hear me, you can handle this. Okay, you can deal with it. You're punishing yourself based on the trauma you went through. You're punishing yourself based on the idea that there's something wrong with how you think and feel. Okay. We need to get back into a situation, Kat, where you're openly talking and working on this trauma you went through at the hands of your brother. I know that there was some issues with him coming out of prison, and then your mother passed away, but we need to get back on track with working on that. Okay. And yeah, getting back to Laura's question about the stigma is slowly eroding. Thank God. Okay. Slowly eroding, slowly getting to a point where people are beginning to realize the giving into this idea of a mental health stigma is like saying that, oh, wait, well, this form of pain in our society is okay, but this form of pain is not. And it's literally why we have the kind of society we have. We have a society of people holding in their pain, especially in this country, because they learn to have a fear of weakness, of insecurity, of things that cause us to not feel like we're on our best game. Nothing wrong with that. Like I mentioned before about Naomi, the tennis player, she has every right in the world to say, look, I don't like talking to the media. I have social anxiety and it needs to be respected. Okay. If she said, oh, I have a sore throat and I can't talk. Oh, okay. No problem. There should be no delineation of what is acceptable pain and what isn't. Mental illness, unhealed traumatic wounds, emotional wounds, unworked out anger, unprocessed negative self-hate, like we talked about with Kat, is the reason we have the kind of culture we have. We have a culture of hatred, not exclusively, but we have a culture of polarization. You got to be a liberal or you got to be a conservative. You can't be both. You got to be this or you got to be that, because we're trying to fit things into this idea of a unified self, this idea that I am this Dr. Stephen Walker all the time, and I'm never allowed to have any kind of an emotional situation or lose control of my emotions. Let's get my wife down here and she'll talk to you about, what happened tax night when the clock was ticking and I completely messed up my taxes. Okay, you talk about a meltdown. Now I'm talking about throwing things and violent, but just that anxiety, that fear that, well, anyway, we don't need to get into all that. But yeah, and I made it okay. I told myself, it's okay, dude. It's okay. It's all right, man. It's okay. You got a lot of pressure on you. It's okay. Thankfully, I have a very nurturing, kind wife who worked me through it and calmed me down and got me back on track, and everything worked out. But the key is, you got to make your negative emotions. You have to make your anxieties, your fears, your depressions okay to you. It's okay that I feel this, and then you got to work on them. Okay. So Kat's alter Amity saying it was recommended by our doctor to suppress her for now till we figure out the cause. Okay, sounds good. Also, I came from a culture where mental health is taboo and never spoken about or treated. Okay, well, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Cultural conditioning. So yeah, I'll default to your treatment provider, Kat Amity, because I certainly don't want to do anything that's going to cause any harm, because that's, our fear, provider's fear is doing anything that causes harm to a client. And cynics will say, oh, because you'll get sued. No, we have insurance for that. It's not that. It's the guilt we'll feel. It's the regret. Why didn't I? So absolutely, if you feel that it's time to suppress her for a little while, to work through and figure out a cause, great. But let's figure out the cause. Okay, because I can tell you what the cause is. The cause is the trauma that she went through with her brother, which caused her to hate herself. But yeah, take it step by step. But you're absolutely right. A culture where mental health is taboo and never spoken about or treated. And that's what we need to work on as a culture. We need to realize, wait a minute, wait. That's bullshit. And my son's not here tonight, so I can curse, but he broke me of that. But it's it's BS. The idea that we have to, as a culture, continue to be ashamed of what we're thinking and feeling and the pains we're feeling is just ridiculous. If you really stop and think about it. I mean, look at racism. At least people are becoming more conscious of how ridiculous racism is to hate a specific group of people based on what you haven't even met, based either on what you learned or early one or two negative experiences you've had. It's the same thing with mental illness. To suppress and hide your negativity, your darkness, whatever is bumming you out, is what is causing, that is the illness in our society. And then we have all these unlicensed, unchecked, unregulated providers on YouTube or Facebook or whatever who are giving people mental health advice and haven't a clue what they're talking about. Haven't a clue. Literally, if you listen to some of them from a mental health perspective, it's literally like an oncologist or a gastroenterologist going on YouTube and hearing people give people advice on how to treat their cancer. It's insane that people are not understanding that what they're not questioning. Wait a minute. Whoa. What is this? What is it? What is this? What am I? Like, I was watching one of these, home courses on whatever. And the tagline was, there is no good or bad memory. And that one was just so ludicrous to me. I had to make a comment, and, in defense of the company doing it, they responded and we engaged in a little back and forth. But to tell people who have been traumatized that there's no good or bad memory is just so tone deaf. Is so unaware of the fact that, of course, people have painful bad memories that they need to work on, and telling them that there's no such thing as a bad memory is just, hello. Why don't we get on YouTube and start telling people that cancer can be treated with Pepsi? Anyway, I have a new psychologist. This is Kat's Alter. I have a new psychologist who specializes in DID. So all my care is transferred to her, and she's amazing. And Kat was in recovery for over a year. It happened out of nowhere after our mom passed. So it's starting to square one again. Well, there's no square one. Okay. I hear you, Amity, but there's no square one. It's like working out. You have, it's called muscle memory. If I ever get back into the gym, a lot of that muscle that I built up will come back. It's not square one. It's a process of getting back on the horse and realizing how you fell off and working through it. So great. Work with the new psychologist. Kat, if you can hear me, you're doing the right thing. Remember, you got to believe in Kat's ability to manage and work through this, okay? You got to believe that you can heal, Kat. That's a huge component to this, okay? You got to keep moving forward so that you don't let that feeling of the pain that you're so used to feeling convince you that there's no way it's ever going to heal. But you got to do the protocols of working through it. And we got to keep working on Kat's relationship with Kat. Okay. Finding the new triggers, add to the old ones, and work together to help us grieve healthy. Beautiful. Well, that ain't square one, sister. That ain't square one. Just to be able to say, just to be able to write, finding the new triggers, add to the old ones, and work together to help us grieve healthy. That's the sign of somebody who's done some work. Okay, so it's not square one. It's a continuation of where you left off. Okay, because there is muscle memory when it comes to our thoughts and emotions. Okay. So anyway, thank you for all the interactions. Getting back to the grief, closing that up real quick. Not real quick, but you know what I'm saying? It's such a broad topic. If you're struggling with grief, if you're struggling with managing painful emotions from your past, then I would highly recommend you get into what is feeding those negative emotions. And I'm not saying every time, because there are no guarantees in this field, but a lot of the time, what is feeding the grief are feelings of inadequacy, meaning feelings that you didn't do enough. I could have done more. I should have done more. Why didn't I do more? I should have been a better son. I should have been a better daughter. Instead of focusing on how you have been a good son, how you have been a good daughter. If you had an estranged relationship with somebody and they passed away, please try to remember takes two to estrange a relationship. Okay. It takes two, it takes multiple people. Maybe you were hurt a lot as a kid and you needed to just distance yourself, because that is not your fault. A lot of times what's feeding grief is, like I said before, feelings of regret. Oh, why didn't I do this? You got to work on them. Okay. Amity's saying, I've learned writing letters to our mom and placing them in her urn has helped us out a lot. Great. But remember, Amity, it's partly the act of placing it in the urn, but the major part is getting that emotion out on paper and realizing what it's coming from. Okay. Reminding yourself that you're talking out what you're feeling while you're reading it. So a YouTube viewer who, c'est moi, I guess I'm not French, but is saying, OMG, what an important sentence. It takes two people to relationship. Yes, exactly. It takes two people to degrade a relationship. It takes two people to make a relationship work. And people who have suffered a loss, people who are suffering the death of somebody who has passed away, forget that it's not your fault that you weren't close. It's not your fault alone that you feel estranged from people in your family. Maybe there's some good reason why you decided while they were alive to say, I don't think I can deal with more of this pain. Maybe you tried to work it out with them and they didn't want to go there. They didn't want to talk to you about it. Maybe these issues go way back to when you were a kid and you were traumatized, or you got whatever, or you didn't get enough love, or you didn't get consistent love, or you didn't get, you were beaten, or you were sexually abused, or you had a drunk parent, or you were parentified. But remember, grief for the loss of somebody significant in your life is also fed by, I shouldn't feel this way. She was my mother. He was my father. He or she was he was my my brother. She was I shouldn't feel this way. And you know what? People who say to other people, but that's your whatever, you are basically traumatizing, hurting another person by not realizing that maybe there's some very good reasons for why they feel what they feel. I hear that a lot with people. People will say they feel guilty that that they don't feel pain that they should, or the pain that they're feeling is being magnified by things that weren't dealt with by in their family. Kat saying, or just watching the moon and speaking to her also helps. Absolutely, absolutely. Talking to your mom. Remember, your mom wants you to heal. Your mom does not have any ill intent towards you. You know, assuming there's an afterlife and, you know, love and spirit continues and all that. In that framework, why would somebody on the other side be thinking negative thoughts about you? Okay, I used to feel that way, but I realized he needs to be cut off from my life. As long as he's around, I would never heal. I'm like, oh, absolutely. And I'm sure we're talking about your brother. But yes. So remember, if you are grieving the loss, the main thing you have to say to yourself is, it's okay how I'm feeling. You have to remind yourself that it's not my fault alone that the relationship wasn't what it could be. It's not. So getting another question from YouTube, c'est moi. How could I get past the regret that I didn't have courage to tell my family about something that was super important and could have changed their lives for the better? Well, I don't know about get past the regret that you didn't have the courage, but right there, my brother, or are you, I can't really tell, my human, I would just say, it's okay that you didn't have the courage. Maybe they didn't tell you that. Maybe the relationship with them degraded to the point where you didn't feel a lot of that desire to make their lives better. How do you know their lives would have been better? How do you know that? You don't know that. They may have heard your advice and been like, okay, dude, or honey, whatever, that you don't know that they would have implemented. People have this idea that you can say a sentence or two to somebody and boom, they're on it. It's not like that, people. If it was like that, we wouldn't have the kind of suffering we have. Whatever you're blaming yourself for not changing their life for the better, wow. I mean, that you got a lot of power. You got a lot of power. And what I'm hearing right underneath that is too hard on yourself. You're being too much of a perfectionist. You're expecting that somehow you're going to alter their life for the better by what? You're going to tell them something and they're going to be like, oh, wow, okay, now my life is on a completely different course. No, my brother or sister, it doesn't work that way. They may have taken the advice and been like, can you believe what is this? You do not know their lives would have been for the better. You don't. Maybe it's money. I don't know. Maybe you should have given them advice on money. Money is not going to make someone's life better just by definition. So I don't know what it was, but I would encourage you to look at and ask yourself, wait a minute, how do I know their life would have been for the better? How do I know that? I don't know that. Why am I putting all this pressure on myself? Why am I beating myself? Where did I learn to beat myself up? What's going on with this regret? Why didn't I feel like I wanted to tell them? Is that all my fault that I didn't feel close enough to them or loyal enough to them? Why am I not loyal to them? You're blaming yourself for a lot of things that happened when you were still a kid that you weren't even aware that was degrading the connection in your family. Okay. Kat saying you'll experience a lot of emotions at once. It's perfectly normal. Don't bottle it up. We made the mistake and it's hard. And it's had a negative impact. Yeah. And remember though, the negative impact it's had, Amity or Kat, is not your fault. You didn't ask to be abused. Okay? You didn't ask for the trauma. You didn't ask to be dealing with this. Excuse me. You didn't ask for dissociative identity disorder. You didn't ask for any of this. So whatever you're still feeling, whatever negative impact you're feeling now is not your fault. It's not your fault. Bottling your emotions up, not your fault. Like you said before, no one talked about it. Okay, great. Well, I hope that helps. C'est moi. Thank you for everybody. Like I said, I'm going to try to get on more now that some things have leveled out in my personal life. And again, it's, being a frontline mental health, full-time mental health provider where I'm seeing 8, 9, 10 clients back to back, sometimes 45 minutes to an hour, usually an hour, you get to a point where you don't have a lot more at the end of the day. So sometimes it's difficult for me to log on, but please keep your comments coming. Please comment on this if you're seeing it. In closing, please remember, if you've ever thought about getting help, one of my sponsors is betterhelp.com. You can use this promo code to get a discounted rate. Look for their logo and use that discounted rate. It's betterhelp.com/Dr. Walker, and you can get a discounted rate. Don't suffer in silence, please. Don't suffer in silence. You don't need to suffer in silence. It was good seeing you guys again. Like I said, I'm going to try to get on more regularly and keep the topics coming. So in closing, check out helpahuman.org. You know, somebody with oodles of money who wants to do something helpful with it, send them there, because every penny goes towards somebody's copay, somebody's treatment that they can't afford. If I can't accept an insurance company, I can draw from that fund. Okay. Shoot them to that. Remember, if you're struggling with grief, talk things out, work it through, try to get to the roots of what you're feeling. But above all, tell yourself it's okay that I'm still grieving, but then get a realistic appraisal of what you're grieving over. Okay. Talk it out with somebody. All right, people, thanks for logging on. I appreciate the questions. Thank you to Amity and Kat, c'est moi, Laura, everybody who asked a question. Marie, I hope that helped too. Josie, Penny, thank you for logging on. Again, I apologize for being gone for 3 weeks, but I'm going to try to get on at least once a week moving forward. And if you have an idea for something you want me to talk about or get into, shoot me a text or an email. Let me give you my website address. Here's my website address if anybody wants to contact me directly, and you can do that. All right. All right, everybody. Good seeing everybody. Thank you for bearing with me as we went through our little rough patch, but now we're back. And please, please work on your issues. Okay, people? Do not suffer in silence. You can log on to betterhelp.com/Dr. Walker and get some sessions. They're affordable. They're with a licensed person. Please question the people you're getting psychological and emotional help from online. Find out, go to their about page, type them their name in. If they have no mental health training, run. Anyway, good to see everybody. Talk to you soon.